Joining us on the line tonight is a man returning for an unprecedented 5th time to the two-man power trip of wrestling. So we've either done something really good or he's coming to give us a little bit of guff as we welcome in the one and only, doesn't need the full introduction after 5 times, the best of all time, James E. Cornette. Mr. Cornette, thanks for joining us again.
Good Lord, if that wasn't the full introduction, I'd hate to hear when you get wound up at 5 times. 5 times on this program. It's it's an earth-shaking, a revolutionary happening, a wrestling history in the making here. It's almost equivalent to when Lou Thez won the NWA championship for the record 6th time. And suddenly, here I am 5 times. I'm coming for you, Lou. I'm coming for you, baby. Me and you in St. Louis. We'll get Longson to referee. Anyway, how are you guys?
Oh, we're doing excellent. You edged out your buddy Jim Ross now by 1 appearance. You guys were tied for all of 1 week, and now you have edged him out. So I think there's a little competitive balance there, shifting back to Camp Cornette here after this appearance.
Well, you could actually look at it like, I can't believe it. You got a star of the magnitude of Jim Ross to do this program only 1 less time than I have. So that's the way I would look at that. But no, seriously, you guys, you have a great listenership out there. I understand the prisons and penal colonies, penal farms. Can't wait for the program every week. So we got that going for us. What about that big deal coming up in May in Richmond?
Here we are to talk about the TMP TCon 3 extravaganza. We've been talking about it for weeks, and now to finally have you on and formally discuss May 18th down there in Richmond, Virginia at the beautiful Holiday Inn on Commerce Road. TMP TCon 3, the Jim Cornette at Midnight Express 35th anniversary. How are you looking forward to it as much as we're looking forward to it? This is going to be one hell of an adventure down there in a amazing wrestling city of Richmond, Virginia.
Oh my, the wrestling history of Richmond goes so far back, and I go so far back. Richmond is one of the first major Crockett Promotions cities that we came to when we came to the Crockett Promotions to the area. And first of all, that Holiday Inn is beautiful that we're going to be at, because I remember back in the 30 plus years ago, almost 35 years ago, when I started going to Richmond, we were staying in some cheap hotels. I mean, the room was so small, you stuck the key in the door, it broke the window. They stole my towels on numerous occasions at the hotel we used to stay at, but now we come a beautiful Holiday Inn. And not only the Midnight Express getting back together, it's our 35th anniversary, as you mentioned, 35 years ago this past November, as a matter of fact. Me and Bob Eaton and Dennis Condrey went to Mid-South Wrestling as a team for the first time. And, of course, so this is our year-long 35th tour. And Stan Lane's going to be there, too, even though he's only got 32 years. Still, he's part of the It's like we're going to have to start giving out gold watches or something in the Midnight Express. But anyway, Stan's going to be there. It's not often that you get a chance to see all 4 of us in the same place at the same time anymore, because we're all hermits in our own way. Of course, Dennis Condrey just made his first personal appearance in December in Nashville that he'd made in the last 5 years, because as we mentioned on my program, and it's been out there, that he had a bout with throat cancer and several surgeries, chemotherapies, treatments, etc. And finally, he's got his weight back. He's cancer-free. He's passed all his tests. And we're going to get together a limited amount of times this year, probably about 4 or 5 in total, and Richmond being one of the big ones. And so it's great to get together with the guys again. And like you said, Richmond is an incredible wrestling city, and some of the fans that I know I will see there. I don't want to mention any names, because if I leave anybody out, they'll browbeat me when I see them. But the Carolinas and Virginia fans, I mean, they last for years and decades. They grew up around wrestling there in the area. And they always they love to come back and see the guys, because that era of Crockett Promotions, the 70s and 80s, just made such an impact on those people there.
Yeah, and this is our third year doing this show in Richmond, and obviously every year that we've had it so far, I mean, you are by far the most requested guest that anybody has brought to our attention. I mean, of course, you know that. I mean, the people of Richmond, they love to hate you, but I'll tell you what. I mean, just to see
Well, I'm often in those states, the Mid Atlantic area. I'm still often asked about and requested, such as the subpoenaed even sometimes to appear.
Yeah, it's been an absolute joy to see how the fans have responded to the announcement that you're coming down to Richmond, and especially the whole entire package of the Midnight Express, but also, and not to be outdone, the entire Jim Cornette experience, which has turned into its own amazing little entity there. That you're on the road, you're doing these live shows, you've got the podcast, you're absolutely. I always say you are the perfect podcast subject or host because you have so much that you could talk about. But now you've got the Jim Cornette experience, and kind of talk about how we're going to integrate all of that into one VIP experience here at TNP TCon 3.
Well, that's right. Everybody's a VIP by cracky. No, here's the thing is I do a podcast, 2 podcasts per week, as a matter of the Jim Cornette Experience on Thursdays and Corny's Drive-Thru on Mondays, where we let the viewer mail decide the show. The questions from the cult of Cornette listeners out there, they send them in, they pull up to the window, and I dispense the bag of greasy wrestling knowledge and goodness. And it's just, I'm as flabbergasted as anybody. We did, between the 2 shows in the month of January, just right at 1 million downloads in the month. And people, and we don't do a show. My co-host Brian Lass and I, we don't do a show. We have some very cheap sound effects. I mean, we're, hold on here. We're at that level on the sound effects, and we don't really do any pre-recorded bits or pieces or slick commercials. It's old time radio. We just talk. It's not even radio. It's a conversation between me and the audience where I either talk about wrestling and how I feel about it or how it used to be, or educate them and inform them on the old days, or I just rant and rave about shit that pisses me off. And between the 2 of those things, people like to listen to me. And so, like I said, it's not really a show. Sometimes it's therapy for me. That's why they say when I do it live, is it a stand-up show? I said, no, often I melt down. So I call it a stand-up meltdown. But so anyway, it's just kind of a get-together, every few days with me and the audience that like, as I say, for people who like that kind of thing, it's the kind of thing those people like. And we just have a conversation. So I've found that then when I go to live events, whether it be we were up at Keystone Comic Con in Philadelphia back in September, or I've done this a variety of places. We did the UK tours a couple of times. I've guested on Jim Ross's show. I'm like his Arthur Treacher. For anybody out there, probably a couple of burglars and Arthur Godfrey got that line. But anyway, so when I come to these live events, I'm doing one in Chicago in March, have a beef with Jim Cornette. Because not only, we started it with extra cheese in Philadelphia where everybody got a cheesesteak. And the manager up at Pat Steaks was tremendous and comped the whole rowdy lot of us. But in Chicago, it's have a beef with Jim Cornette because, Chicago's famous for its Italian beef sandwiches. And what we do is we sit down, I tell some stories, have my stand-up meltdown. It's an interactive Q&A with the audience. We can interact back and forth. As a matter of fact, we can interact as much as you want. It's that kind of show. No, I'm kidding. No, it's an interactive Q&A with the audience, and sometimes I will even pickle the more vulnerable members of the audience with a few verbal jabs. And everybody gets a free 8x10 autographed, a photo op, some hangout time, and we have something to eat. And in Richmond, it's still being decided because Richmond doesn't have a cuisine that just jumps right out at you. Philly cheesesteak or the Chicago Italian beef. We're trying to figure out which culinary path to take, but you will get fed. And after the convention, the big fan fest all day, where it's not only me and the Midnight Express, but all the other stars, you're gonna have an appetite worked up. So for $40, you get an 8x10, you get a photo op, you get the show, and you get something to eat. What the hell are we doing?
I'll tell you,
This is insane. We should take this back now that I've said it out loud. We're giving it away.
it's almost the hardest thing. That it's not putting the websites together or getting the ticket stuff settled or even booking guests or vendors. The hardest part is trying to figure out what the best food is to offer the guests of Richmond. And I got to say, we got it narrowed down. We will say that we're at that point of it, but man, oh man, if Richmond could come up with something that they're known for in the next like 2 months, then they're going to get booked for the show.
And the only thing is, I had the question asked to me, said, what about for your vegetarian fans? What could you do? And I said, well, the only thing I could think of is if I went to Boise and say, potato Jim Cornette. I don't. Otherwise, we're stuck there. Possibly a salad at some point. Salad in San Francisco. I don't know. That's too far for me to go anyway. Not the salad, but San Francisco. That's all the way across the country. I'll eat a salad every once in a while. Buddy Wayne in Memphis, I loved him to death. Buddy was huge. Buddy had he was just round, and his head was so big. That's what his son Ken called him as a nickname, Head. And he'd call him out in the locker room, and Buddy would say, "Don't call me Head, Ken." But Buddy, every time he'd see him, he'd say, "Buddy, how's your weight?" He said, "Well, I've been on a diet, Jim." Well, what eating, buddy? Well, like today, all I've had to eat was a salad. And I said, if all you've had to eat today is a salad, you must have had it in a number 2 wash tub. That's the only thing I can figure out. Anyway, so it's going to be fun in Richmond. That's May 18th. I don't even know if we said the date yet. But,
yeah.
How can the folks get tickets to the big undetermined food extravaganza? And I'll have burger towels there for sale. So whatever it is, it's going to be greasy. So when you got smiling faces after the show and you got my greasy goodness spread all over your face and all over your hands, burger towels will be available where you can clean yourself off before you go home.
Well, as a matter of fact, Jim, they can go to www.tmptcon3.brownpapertickets.com, and that's where you'll find...
Wait, what now? Good Lord, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Now, give us that again now. What is it?
It is www.tmptcon3, that's the number 3.brownpapertickets.com.
Okay, so you said it slower that time, so I was able to... Thought you were going for brown paper bag. That's what we should hand out at the door for people to put over their heads so they're not seen in unsavory company such as mine.
And speaking of unsavory company, I mean, I don't know where you're at with them these days, but the other team that we've got lined up so far for this event is the Rock and Roll Express. So I hope that you guys are ready, because not only do we have the Midnights, but how can we have a Midnights anniversary without the Rock and Roll Express? Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express in Richmond, May 18th as well.
No, now we're not coming. No. Well, see, now here's the thing. Because now we have got the Rock and Roll Express outnumbered because there's 4 of us now and only 2 of them. So we're fine. We're fine because they ain't going to be starting anything. And they know better than that.
And then and what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to show up and you're going to have to see if anything does end up going down, especially in that VIP experience. But it's going to be an amazing day. We've got a lot to talk about in the next couple of months to build this thing up, and obviously everybody who tunes into your show is going to hear you talking about it as well, and we are just so happy to have you coming to TMP TCon 3. Now, I want to switch gears.
So think about this. Richmond, Virginia, one of the linchpin cities of Crockett Promotions. The Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express for the NWA World Tag Team Championship once sold out the Richmond Coliseum, over 12,000 people, a 6-figure gate 30-something years ago. It'd be almost $500,000 today. So you got Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, plus Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, and Stan Lane, and Jim Cornette, all in the same place. A lot of people would say, we'll just stop right there. There is no need in a city like Richmond, Virginia, where those 2 teams were so popular that they would literally turn people away from the Richmond Coliseum, which seats just a few more people than that fine Holiday Inn that you're located at on May 18th. Just stop right there. You don't need to go any further. It's overkill. But you're going to have even more superstars than just the Midnight and Rock and Roll Expresses there at TMPT3Con.
That's right. Even more people who are going to be announced, more guests. And I'll throw one more at you here just to show you the reach of TNPTCon 3 in that we have vendors coming from all throughout the United States. We have a first time ever reunion happening in Richmond. The first time it's ever happened in the state of Virginia at TNPTCon 3. Somebody who you know very well, our tag team partner from the Triple Threat podcast, Shane Douglas, reuniting with his valet and manager, Francine from ECW at TNPTCon 3.
So Francine and Shane Douglas, the franchise and Francine, reunited there together. Francine, I assume, will be wearing something similar to what she wore back in the ECW days. Boy, that was a sight to behold.
Yes, indeed, she will be.
and Shane Douglas will hopefully be wearing a sight more clothing than he used to wear back in those days because he is a sight to behold. But they will be back together. So right there's more. You got the Midnight. You got the Rock and Roll. Now you got the reunion of franchise and Francine. And you're saying there's even in the days to come, even more superstars to be announced.
Even more, but you're going to have to stay tuned as we reveal the rest of the guests coming to TNPTCon 3. So we thought we'd set the table with that and kind of roll them out now as we get on the road to May 18th.
Roll them out, rolling. But I'll tell you what, just right there, like you said, not only a first for Richmond, but a first for the state of Virginia. First time ever for Richmond, Norfolk, Hampton, Roanoke, Salem, Lynchburg, Chilhowie, anywhere in Virginia. First time in the whole state.
The first time, which is it's kind of crazy when you think about it. How in God's name have they not been able to have some kind of pairing in the state of Virginia, especially going through Richmond, a big city like that? But hey, that's ECW. That was Paulie not booking the right towns, I guess. But that's a whole nother conversation.
I'll tell you what, if he would have run more shows in Hayside, Virginia and stayed out of places like Philadelphia and New York, he'd have been better off. The overhead was much cheaper.
I'm sure it could have been. But I want to switch gears a little bit to your podcast here because I got to ask this. Now, you said your podcast is a little bit like therapy, but I want to know, have you locked yourself in a padded cell yet that you have begun to watch and now break down Monday Night Raw? What is going through your head as you're watching these shows these days?
Well, almost a 44 caliber bullet at one point, because the first week, because it happened by accident, and because I was wanting to see the Revival win the tag team title. But since I didn't know that was going to take place until after it obviously had happened, I had to watch the on-demand version of Raw, and you cannot fast forward on my on-demand version of it. So I had to sit through like 2 hours and 15 minutes of that show in order to get to that tag team match, and I spoke about it on the air and gave some of my opinions on the previous 2 hours as a new viewer, because I've not watched an episode of Raw in several years. I've seen some clips, and I fast forwarded through some things a couple years ago when I inducted the Rock and Roll in the WWE Hall of Fame, but I've not been a regular viewer. So I've commented on the show from the standpoint of somebody who liked wrestling but was a new viewer to what they were doing particularly, and how it was almost impossible to figure it out because they don't tailor their program to pick up new fans easily. You don't know, people are not identified. Stuff is just obviously taken for granted. And so then I thought I might have been too harsh. So the next week I watched it again on purpose to give a little more detailed review. And I did, but I wasn't too harsh the first time. And I mean, and a lot of the problem is what people don't understand about why these crowds are so dead. They think it's because of the bad wrestling, which in some cases it is. But as a person who's promoted live events as well as written television shows and formatted shows and etc., they are asking a live event crowd to pay premium ticket prices to leave their homes and drive somewhere and park and go into a major arena and buy the $8 soft drink and the $10 popcorn and basically listen to a bunch of people stand there in the wrestling ring and talk to them, or watch television on the big screen in the arena. And that's why those crowds are so pissed off. That is the most live crowd friendly wrestling show I've ever seen in my life, because you will go 2 hours in and they've seen 2 dark matches featuring underneath talent and a match and a half on Raw that has some type of indecisive finish.
Think about this, and this was something that I was thinking to myself and I couldn't figure it out. Have you ever thought of a time in WWE's history where it's WrestleMania season and they decide to change the booking committee and they bring in Bruce Pritchard to creative? Have you ever heard of that before? It's nuts.
No. Well, I was there. It was 20 years ago today, Sergeant Pepper. No, it was about 22 years ago, as a matter of fact. I was there when Vince got fed up and decided that he was going to go with the only person that wasn't currently responsible for anything, and that's how we got Vince Russo. Because he was mad, because here's the thing. He sends out, in a lot of cases, and we used to joke about it, he sends out what he wants by mental telepathy. And if you don't pick up on it, it's your fault. And I'm sure that he has been thinking, because Vince McMahon is not hired Bruce Pritchard back because he's the greatest booker since Bill Watts or Toots Mondt. Bruce Pritchard is going to serve on the creative team because Vince McMahon knows that Bruce gets it. He gets it. And he can relay it to other people. What is it? It is what Vince McMahon likes and what Vince wants. And he is probably, I can see Vince sitting there going, damn it, pal. They just don't get it. They're just not, they don't get it. These people, the kids, they don't get it. I need somebody to help them get it. Get Bruce, he gets it. And I guarantee you that Bruce Pritchard will be able to articulate what Vince McMahon wants to these people probably better than Vince can, because Vince sometimes sends it out by mental telepathy. But Bruce has been picking up on those signals for 25 years. So, no, is Bruce going to come in and immediately rewrite the television program and come up with the most exciting finishes since, Eddie Graham? No. Bruce is going to be able to convey to everybody else what Vince wants.
Whether that be good or bad, I guess.
Well, I wasn't commenting on the quality or quantity of. I'm just saying that Bruce gets it, and it is what Vince wants.
It's very interesting, kind of the way the WWE is right now. Very boring, let's be honest. It's not a great show. The creative kind of stinks. They really don't have a plan for WrestleMania, it doesn't seem like. It's just all over the place. But you mentioned liking the Revival out of everything, and I know my partner Chad is a big Young Bucks fan for God knows what reason, but he is. I love.
He'll grow out of it. Well, once he hits puberty.
He's lying, but continue.
I personally, I do love the Revival. I love kind of what they're about. I love the wrestling ability. I love that they're kind of Arn and Tully mixed with the Midnight Express. What is your kind of take on them? I know you love them, but what about them do you love so much?
Well, it's just because they understand the art and the science of tag team wrestling. And they veterans and guys who've been around the business for a while, people who've been involved in training, and just the practitioners of the art can sit there and tell you when a guy knows how to work by the way that he locks up when he starts the match, but by the little things, the way he moves around in the ring, how he knows where he is at all times. Those guys are throwbacks to technicians of 30 years ago because once again, they grew up on Carolina's wrestling, and they studied it, and they were fans and disciples, and they study the tapes to this day. But they concentrate on making sure that they close up all their loopholes. All any loopholes in the logic of their match is closed up. Their shit looks good. They take the people on a ride up and down. They even make tags the right way. I see these bogus ass tag teams on supposed national television, and they're tagging each other by slapping each other on the back on the shoulder blade, or touching the guy's toe of his boot, or standing up on the bottom rope, leaning over. And So it's refreshing to see guys that always tag hand to hand, but can do it from anywhere and throw in the blind tags and the little do-si-dos and things that just makes tag team wrestling fun and exciting, and the art of it and the distractions and the double team moves. They've got everything. It's in another atmosphere where the promotion sold tag team wrestling on a par with singles wrestling. They would be in main events. They're just in the WWE, where unfortunately it's a middle of the card thing.
It is great and refreshing how kind of old school they are, how good they are. Like you said, they know how to do double teams. They know the psychology of things. And I always, watching them, think back, obviously on a Tully, but Midnight Express, those double team moves, wrestling the match as a team, doing tag team maneuvers. Does that take a lot of more psychology, the fact that it's 4 guys working together rather than 2? I mean that's kind of an obvious question, but I feel like so many tag teams out there wrestle kind of singles matches, if you know what I mean. They don't quite get it.
Well, yeah. It doesn't take more psychology. It's just a different kind. And that's, unfortunately, but what a lot of guys who don't have a lot of experience these days in tag team wrestling, but then sometimes they're just thrown together with a guy as partners, but 2 guys will wrestle, 1 from each team, and they'll do some things, and then another guy gets in and he's doing a different thing than his partner was. And there's no cohesion, and it doesn't really gel as a match, because they're not working together as a team. Psychology of tag team wrestling is different than singles. But that's why, a lot of the guys in the 80s, that's why Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey were so good instantly together. That's why Stan Lane came in after he'd had a top team with Steve Keirn. He comes in and replaces Dennis Condrey in the Midnight Express, and they didn't really miss a beat, because those guys had all worked the Tennessee territory. Tag team wrestling in the South was a huge attraction, and they all knew how to work a tag team match. It didn't have to be just with that specific partner. If you're a good tag team wrestler, you can adapt. And Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson were the same way, because Robert Gibson's brother, Ricky, his older brother, they'd been a team since Robert was 18 years old, and Ricky Gibson was one of the best babyface wrestlers I've ever seen in his youth before injuries and etc. Those guys, they were all involved in tag teams. Ricky Morton had teamed up with Ken Lucas, and before that, Eddie Gilbert when he first got in wrestling. So it's a different psychology, but if you know it, you can adapt to a good partner who knows the same kind of stuff.
And I've been seeing the NWA popping up more and more, and now I see the Crockett Cup is returning in North Carolina in the end of April, and I see you kind of attaching yourself back to the NWA, which is kind of cool and refreshing. It's refreshing.
Well, wait a minute! Don't put it like that. I see you attaching yourself like I'm some blood-sucking leech that's latched onto the, No, actually, the NWA, I did the color commentary for their 70th anniversary event down in Nashville last October, and where Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes had that rematch for the NWA title, and that was, it was a lot of fun. I enjoy announcing, and Nashville is a place that is near and dear to my heart, because that's the territory where I started in wrestling, and I'd been to the Nashville Fairgrounds building many times over the last 40 years. And so then the NWA is bringing back the Crockett Cup, and that's scheduled for April 27th in Concord, North Carolina, suburban Charlotte, that beautiful new Cabarrus Arena up there. And they asked me if I would do color along with Ian Riccaboni of Ring of Honor and Joe Galley of the NWA. And I said, sure, because the Crockett Cup and the Midnight Express were identified with each other. That was kind of the Midnight Express's lot in life. Every year we'd go to the semifinals and we'd get beat by the eventual winners, but at least we got knocked out the first year in the Superdome by the Road Warriors, but we fixed their little red wagon and knocked them out in Baltimore the following year. So, and Animal's going to be there too, I believe. He's got a team that he is mentoring. But that's going to be another Midnight Rock and Roll reunion there for the VIP event, along with Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff in the afternoon, but it's going to be available on Fight TV. So if anybody wants to hear me talk anymore, you can get the NWA Crockett Cup on April 27th. Anywhere in the world that you got a computer, an internet connection, we can be beamed into your home now. Imagine that if you'd have told me when I was a kid, when I was climbing on my roof, turning my antenna, trying to get Dick the Bruiser's TV from Indianapolis at 2:00 in the morning, that you can just turn on your computer and see anything at the drop of a hat, the blink of an eye. Would have taken all the fun out of it.
No, modern technology is absolutely insane. And the fact that it's on Fight TV is pretty cool. And the fact that we're going to hear you yet again at the NWA is awesome. And, you actually know your history pretty good. You know that? You have a great memory for that. Losing to the Road Warriors, losing to the Superpowers, and then losing to Sting and Luger by Midnight Express. All the history of the Crockett Cup right there.
Yeah, and I guess my memory is like I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, and I forget conversations that I have that I didn't want to have in the first place real quickly. But I'm always been a wrestling nerd, and somehow these facts and figures stick with me. I don't know. It's I was a terrible student in the subjects that I wasn't interested in.
But wrestling is your true passion, and you're such a historian. You know not only your history, but obviously you can recite other history pretty easy. Like you mentioned Lou Thesz before. I mean, you're pretty good with this wrestling stuff. I mean, that collection in your house must be pretty good.
And for the NWA 70th show, I cribbed some notes from Scott Teal, an old friend of mine. He used to do the photography in the Nashville territory. He wrote a book recently on Nashville wrestling history up to 1960, from the turn of the century all the way through 1960. And I cribbed some facts, and I'm just hitting poor Joe Galley. He's from I think Texas, and he doesn't know anything about Tennessee wrestling history. So I'm saying that, and Pat Malone, the Green Shadow, sold out the Nashville Hippodrome 124 times or whatever it was, and he's looking at me like I've got a steaming turd hanging out of my mouth. It's the NWA Championship now can be defended on a variety of promotions cards, and it increases the talent pool that can go and challenge for that title. Because I said it's not just up to the champion that holds a belt that makes it important. It's the number of people and the quality of people that want to challenge for it too. So I think they've done a great job with that in a variety of countries. Japan, I think Aldous, I believe, he either has gone or is going to go to China. Japan, the UK, the United States, different promotions. 3 years ago, it was like, NWA Dyersburg Wrestling, at the Rec Hall. And now they're in some, pretty big buildings and traveling a lot of places.
Definitely very cool. And it's cool to see kind of wrestling booming again all over the place. So I have to get your opinion. I know you've talked about it on your podcast stuff, but I got to hear, on this show, it would be nice to get a quote, if you will. What are your thoughts on Tony Khan and the Khan family's new little venture here, AEW? You see this thing kind of spiraling out of control? Do you see the comparison to maybe Dixie Carter at all? I mean, is that any of that kind of...
Well, no, because for one, that Dixie never had this much money to begin with. Or her parents didn't, or not that they were going to spend, and actually not at all, because they were multimillionaires. This guy's a billionaire. Here's the thing. No, I don't see anything spiraling out of control. There's no there yet, because yes, the first All Elite show sold out, but that was going to sell out anyway. Again, based on All In, which was kind of the genesis, I think, of this whole thing, and Tony Khan and all those guys' mind. But I've said the Bucks and Cody and Omega and those guys have done a great job of creating their subculture to where that they could do a big show like they did in Chicago and sell 10,000 tickets, and then come back and do something like this 6 months or 8 months later, whatever, and do another big house. And that was something that they could have continued to do once or twice a year, probably for the next couple of years, along with all their other stuff they were doing, wrestling in Ring of Honor and going to New Japan. Instead, they've decided to take the big gamble. And, this guy has got the money, the resources to start and fund as big a promotion as he wants. And if everybody keeps saying they've got a big television deal in place, okay, that would be the next step. The point is, everybody seems to me very confident. And I've been there before. I've started a couple promotions, and a couple of them didn't go. And one of them, OVW, I didn't start, but kind of helped expand. That did go. But it's never easy. And just because you have money to spend on the problem doesn't mean that you can solve the problem. Overconfidence is not good. So confidence is great. Overconfidence is dangerous. The only thing I can see that they're doing wrong is everybody's going into this like, just because we have enough money to do whatever we need to do, this is going to be a fucking a layup, an easy shot, whatever. And no, it's not going to be. What they have to do is they have to figure out what kind of style of wrestling they're going to present, because they can't just be all over the page. They can't have the Chinese acrobats from Taiwan and then a hardcore match and then New Japan strong style, whatever. They've got to have somewhat of a style where all of the different types of matches fit within that logic. And they've got to grab an audience past the independent audience, because you can't depend on just that audience to get a couple million people, to watch your show every week and compete with Vince McMahon's numbers. Or if they get any kind of platform, they're going to need a couple million people a week watching. So the only problem I have with, I've had a great relationship with Cody and I've worked with him recently, and there's a few other people involved, Christopher Daniels, etc. I think the world of, but some of those guys have in the past just been of the opinion that they can just do silly shit because their fans all know and they're all with it, and it's a show and it's to be, fun, not to be taken seriously. And on a mainstream basis, that'll put you out of business in about 3 months. You can't make fun of your own product, and you can't sell silly on network television. So they've got to be athletic, and they got to be serious. And then we shall see.
Like you said, you can't be overconfident. And you obviously, with Smoky Mountain and Rick Rubin, you have a lot of experience in owning and operating and starting your own company. Is it, like we're saying, kind of overconfidence, but is it kind of crazy to put certain guys in certain roles and give them jobs that they've never had before and have no experience with? For instance, Chief Brand Officer is Brandy Rhodes, Cody Rhodes' wife. Cody Rhodes, Executive Vice President. Kenny Omega, Executive Vice President.
Well, wouldn't you know who
won? A little bit of a stretch.
Wouldn't you know who won the pony? My boy Blue won the pony. I've never heard in wrestling about making your family members integral parts of the organization and making all your friends vice presidents. I've never heard of such a thing.
Oh my God.
I see, here's the thing. Once again, they may be taking us a little too far. I'm on their side in terms of one of the reasons why All In was such a success is because for the first time ever, it was the boys. In the fans' mind, it was the boys. Our favorite wrestlers are putting their money where their mouth is and running this on their own. And they're not being held down under the thumb of evil promoters. It's hold my beer. I'm going to help these guys out, right? Well, that's great for the new company to say we're going to give the wrestlers more input and more say in their careers, and we're not going to just treat them like cattle and etc. But I don't know whether we ought to be just making every single one of them an executive vice president. That, as a matter of fact, that was a joke about Vince McMahon in the old days. When I first got there, he'd gone on a round where they gave everybody promotions and new titles or whatever because they added people, and they always had to have a title in the corporate side of the company. So they said every time Vince McMahon walks down the hall on Thursdays, he makes somebody a vice president or whatever. But they did that one time in talent relations. Everybody had some type of title, right? Executive vice president of talent relations, assistant executive vice president, blah, 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 talent relations liaison, whatever. Well, one day they hired somebody, I can't remember, so that made an extra one of us. So we all moved up. And my title became, they added a word to it. I can't remember what it was now, talent relations, something or other. And when I was going down to the cafeteria, everybody that read the memos that they sent out, every morning, all the office people that worked in marketing and merchandising and the travel and everything, they were stopping me to congratulate me. Hey, congratulations. Oh, for what? Well, the promotion. And so I was like asking Bruce, do I get more money now? And no, it's just a title. I said, why are they all so fucking happy for me? It's just it's a gimmick fucking title. I mean, we're in the wrestling business. None of this means anything, but they loved titles and from the corporate side of things.
To me,
I don't know where that story was going.
I think you were saying it's getting a little out of hand, a little out of control with
getting a little out of hand. That's exactly right. That's what and I mean, we'll see. But all I'm going to say is, they can't do the cute shit they do on the indies for a mainstream level promotion, because that's basically the reason why that we're where we are. We have people now, the pool of wrestling fans, of people who like wrestling, is still much smaller than it has been historically throughout the years. Maybe not smaller than it was 3 or 4 years ago, but certainly smaller than it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago, when there were literally tens of millions of people watching wrestling overall over all the territories. The cute stuff on the indies will not satisfy a mainstream television number or any type of. It's a niche audience now where the people spend more money per head than ever before, but it's the only endeavor I can think of, sport, entertainment, or whatever. And a bunch of people there in Richmond, a bunch of the fans will probably testify to this, where more people used to watch something than they do today. And that's what we need to, unfortunately, to overcome, is because between everybody now being smart and knowing what's going on, and that ran a lot of people off when they always knew down deep, some of them didn't, but a lot of them knew down deep, but they didn't want to have it proven. Once they had it proven, they're gone. And then the fact that, a lot of talent has not come through over the last 10 years as mainstream stars, like a Steve Austin and a Rock and an Undertaker and a Mick Foley and on and on. Possibly because those people don't come along regularly, and possibly because guys are not allowed to be outlaw personalities anymore. I've always said, to me, what's taken the bloom off the rose of wrestling's appeal to the mainstream population is that even 20 years ago, definitely 30 years ago, when you saw a badass pro wrestler coming down the ramp ready to kick some ass, you may know that that stuff, they decide who wins and who loses, but that still looks like that guy'd pick his teeth with me. There was some element of danger, some element of aura that the guys had, that they might go into business for themselves. And now, and it's almost written on the talent's faces in a lot of cases. When they're coming down that ramp, that somebody has told them what their name is and what they are supposed to look like or dress like and where they're supposed to go and how long they're supposed to go and who's supposed to win and what they're supposed to say, and that they'll probably get fined or fired or possibly even incarcerated if they were to go off script and somehow go into business for themselves and do something they're not supposed to do. But when I used to see Terry Funk or goddamn Abdullah the Butcher coming out, I'm like, I'm going to get the fuck out of the way, because this son of a bitch is going to eat me. And it just doesn't. It's hard now. And there's a few personalities that can give off the aura that they still might just do whatever the hell they want to do for the sake of it. And Brock Lesnar, and those are generally the ones that draw money.
And that's kind of about it, really. I mean, they really have no other big stars. And it even seems like a guy like The Undertaker isn't supposedly in the plans for WrestleMania. They got nothing going on with him. And now he's taking outside bookings and kind of doing his own thing away from them, and even ends up a part of Starrcast 2, which is kind of associated with AEW loosely, but I mean, they're very close associated. Now he's going to be at that big event. So that's kind of almost not a slap in the face to Vince, but that's almost like a little bit of a shot, if you will, at Vince. Undertaker's doing outside bookings.
Well, but think about this, though. I don't think it's as big a... If Vince might think it's as big a story, I don't think that Undertaker meant for it to be this big of a thing. He's doing several spoken word things. I know he's doing a tour over in the UK, and he's doing this, and he was scheduled for something else, and I think the promoter got cold feet. But at any rate, Undertaker is different than the other guys because he's always been very protective of his gimmick and his image while he was wrestling. And so he didn't do appearances, whether it be a comic convention or a wrestling fan fest or, anything. He did, no matter what it was, you didn't see The Undertaker on Twitter or on social media. You didn't see him very rarely, and only in recent years as he started to slow down in the ring have you seen that he's a human being away from wrestling because he was protective of the image. But now he's got such a name that he can go out and command ridiculous. I've heard the rates quoted, ridiculous amounts of money, because people have never had the chance to meet him and never had the chance to hear him talk. And so now he can do that. And I think he's just, for anybody that can come up with that amount of money, I think he's doing his business now because he's always been also taking a lot of pride in his performance and the ability to rise to the occasion and have that big match. But sooner or later, it's not any disrespect to The Undertaker or anybody else to say you can't do this when you're 100. So can you do it when you're 80 or 70? Where is the cutoff point? How can, at his size, with the abuse he's put his body through, how long can he continue to be The Undertaker in the ring at WrestleMania and not seriously injure himself? So now is the time to maybe transition to the next phase of his career, which is not being Mr. WrestleMania in the ring. He's made Vince McMahon plenty of money. I think it may be time that he can capitalize on the mystery that's always been around him by making money with his image and his brain instead of his body. So I don't begrudge him that at all, and I don't think that Vince should. Is the WWE going to pay him, $100,000 to not answer people's questions or tell stories? What is it's not like he's going now. If he wrestled for somebody else, that would be a kick in old Vince's balls. But until that happens, I think we need to lighten up.
I think everybody kind of assumed that was the case, though, that he was almost like, and we talked about this with JR last week, is that he was almost in that mystique class of that they were like almost like you should be locking him up for a lifetime contract because they put so much into that character, and he turned that persona into what it is. And I think once people see, oh, well, he's being billed as Mark Calloway, a.k.a. The Undertaker, I think that kind of blew everybody's mind because we're not supposed to know that's his name. You know what I mean? We're not supposed to know this about a guy who's been built to be somewhat of a mythical figure in that WWE universe. So I think people really kind of misconstrued what's happening when he took the outside bookings, when that's really just a natural part of what happens at that stage in his career.
Yeah, if the WWE promoted spoken word show tours with their stars, then I'm sure he would love for them to promote his. But since they don't, I imagine he's taking other options.
And they should, and that's a great new revenue stream that they haven't explored.
They do once a week. It's called Monday Night Raw.
Now, I just want to throw one more hypothetical at you before John hits us with the wind down portion of the show. Hypothetically speaking, looking at this kind of renewed, not territory war, not promotional war, since there's not technically a promotion yet, but where would the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette lie in this kind of a landscape, would you guys be looking outside of where you are, or if you were having a contract that was expiring, or would you be looking to kind of stay where you were?
Oh, well, which side are we on already? You didn't tell me which way we were going. Oh, excuse me. What I mean, it's if we were a tag team in the WWE now, we'd be looking to go anywhere. We'd already gone because I mean, we actually gave notice and left in WCW, as you'll recall, when they brought George Scott in at the start of 1989 to book, and we saw that he had no plans to use us, and we're not going to stick around here and, you know, be beaten into powder and be marginalized on television. So we gave our notice because we knew that they would fire him sooner or later, and we would come back. And actually, when you know who won the pony, they fired him before we finished working our notice out. So, you know, you have to, when you're in a position where you know you're better than how you're being portrayed, you have to look at other options. And if the Midnight Express had been in the WWE over the past couple of years, we would have, at first chance, gone to Ring of Honor. Because that way we could fucking get over by doing what we did best, which was getting heat and having good matches and get a better reputation and potentially go back in to another bigger company at another time. Dennis Condrey always told us from the start when we went to Mid-South Wrestling in Louisiana, you don't want to go into a promotion when business is great, because then business was already great. They'll just pay you what they want to pay you, and you don't get credit for anything. You want to go into a territory when business is on its ass. If you can get used in a top spot and pop it, then you'll get rewarded and paid for it, and you'll get the credit for popping the territory, and that's how you get booked other places. And lo and behold, we went into Louisiana when the business was down, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, and Bill Dundee as booker, and popped it. And so after that, Dundee got jobs in various booking companies everywhere from Memphis to WCW. And the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express could go anywhere they wanted to go. Actually, we hardly ever had to go anywhere because from Louisiana, Flair and Dusty and Jim Crockett wanted all of us. So we, within the next, 6 months to a year, ended up there and never really had to go anywhere else because that was the biggest company.
As we hit the wind down button and we wind it down here, I just got to ask this because obviously
here I'll hit the wind down button.
As we do wind it down, I love that sound effect. We got to start using sound effects here, but I digress. The big TMPT-Con 3 coming up, I got to say, because we know obviously it's Richmond, but do you have a favorite Richmond moment? I know you talked about that awesome sellout at the Richmond Coliseum, but do you have some other favorite JCP, NWA, Midnight Express Richmond moments?
Oh God, there was a bunch of them. I loved, Eddie Cheslock and David Lane, those guys used to take pictures of us back in front of that red brick wall in the back of the Richmond Coliseum. And you see that was a very distinctive wall that you would see in the pictures of all the wrestling magazines and everything. Every time I see some of those pictures, I think about Richmond. We had some great fans there, especially the ones that used to give us a ride to the airport and back. Because we pretty much spent our lives back then running from the airport to the hotel to the arena and back, and in the back seats of cars, on the tops of cars, strapped to the bumper of a car like a goddamn deer, however we could get there. But I think even more than the big matches that we had with the Rock and Roll Express there the first time around with them in '86, I'm most proud of the 1988 Great American Bash in Richmond at the Coliseum. Did $113,000 at the gate. And that was usually the biggest house of the year, the Great American Bashes in most of those regular towns. But Dusty, that's what he was trying to get business back up, because that's when Turner Broadcasting was buying the company, and he wanted to make sure his position was secured. He wanted to make sure that we were selling as many tickets as we could at the start, so they could hit the ground running, right? So, boy, he handed him a hot tag and they tripped over the ropes. But he brought back the Luger and Flair world title match rematch from the Bashes to Richmond in September with a double main event with Tully and Arn against the Midnight for the world tag title. And we sold out. We did 13,000 people and $140,000. It was the indoor, regular event gate record for the city of Richmond. The month after the Great American Bash, the back to school month, September, that's always traditionally down. And I looked out there and saw that crowd, and I thought that was a tremendous, tremendous sight and a tremendous night in Richmond. And of course, it was about 2 weeks later, Tully and Arn quit and went to the WWF. Screwed that whole thing up. We were going to be selling out with them for 6 months. I mean, we had just started everywhere the Midnight and Tully and Arn went because they'd waited for the match for 5 years, right, and never seen it. And we did a huge house in Charlotte. We opened up the new Charlotte Coliseum. It was new back then. And did 13,000 people with Flair and Luger and Tully and Arn in the Midnight, and sold out in Richmond. Did a huge house in Greensboro, a good one in Philadelphia, and just it was starting to cook, and then boom, they were gone. Sort of like that South Park episode where they're investing their retirement fund, and we'll put it in at 2%, and it's gone. What? And it's gone.
That's a great reference.
Move along now, customers only.
Oh, God, great. Yeah, that is a great reference. Great episode. And, it's great you mentioned Arn and Tully versus the Midnight. When I was at the Keystone Comic-Con, your invite, by the way, thank you again, you played your tape of the match from Philly, basically the last match that you guys had to go before they left. And that was an awesome experience that you could only experience at the Jim Cornette Experience VIP. So I got to throw that out there. That's right. That's an amazing thing.
Because everyone is different. Everyone is unique because it depends on the audience, too. Because it's not really an audience. It's not really a show. It's just hanging out and hearing me rant and rave and answer questions and bullshit. And we're all VIPs. We're a community. The cult of Cornette. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in Richmond again, not only at the Fan Fest during the day, I think, 10 to 3, but also then we're going to start right quick after the Fan Fest and go however long it takes for everybody to get happy, everybody to get their questions answered, everybody to get their pictures, and everybody to get fed. And we will have fun. And $40, where in the world? Once again, I can't believe we've done this. We might as well just pay them money. It's like giving it away. What was that long-winded website where they can go again to get tickets for this whole excursion?
Well, I mean, would you like me to interject here to reveal the website name again?
You better, as you vamp until you find it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was exactly what I was trying to do. So if you would like to join us at TMPT Con 3, that is myself, JP John Paz, as well as Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, Francine, and Shane Douglas reuniting here in Richmond. It is www.tmptcon3.brownpapertickets.com.
That's exactly what it is. What you just said. And we want to see everybody there. It's going to be fun. One of the handful of Midnight Express reunions this year. Gosh, and if anybody wants to know what I'm doing, go to jimcornette.com because that, the podcast, 2 of them per week. We got the YouTube channel, the NWA commentary, the Midnight Express reunions. I'm doing a couple of other things that may be revealed to the public very soon, possibly on the evening news, accompanied by a mugshot, but in the next week or 2, you'll know about it. And otherwise, jimcornette.com is where you can find me. And great deals on all manner of merchandise at jimcornette.com. We want to give them away, but my wife won't let me.
The best collectible site for anything wrestling related in the world of Jim Cornette is Jim Cornette Collectible. I mean, you really have the absolute best array of your career all encompassed in your Cornette's Collectibles. So we got to give you credit for that.
Well, it not only that, but just if you're a fan of classic wrestling, even if it's not related to Jim Cornette, you can find what you're looking for there. You can get that itch scratched right there at jimcornette.com. But hey, that's how I got started in the business, was taking pictures, selling the pictures at the souvenir stand, doing the programs, you know, hawking the merchandise. And now it's just higher class merchandise for a higher class guy. But I've always collected things. I love collectibles and collecting things.
Well, you fit in well with us because that's absolutely perfect. So we look forward to seeing you May 18th down there in Richmond, Virginia. And obviously we've got a little bit on the road to Richmond. So we will hopefully be retweeting and seeing you on the social media as we get the word out about TMP TCon 3. Mr. Cornette, as always, it is our pleasure.
Thank you. It has certainly been your pleasure. It's going to be a pilgrimage to Richmond by covered wagon through Canaan's land. It's going to be a pilgrimage to see me, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, and Francine and the franchise and all those other folks. And I will talk to you guys soon. We'll keep them updated.